Have you ever questioned whether the person you present to the world is truly who you are? Beneath every habit, reaction, and desire lies a force you may have never consciously met. Carl Jung did not speak of fantasy. He spoke of the reality we deny, the unseen architecture that shapes our lives. It isn't trauma alone that disturbs us. It's what we do not recognize, what we reject, and what we unconsciously obey. There is a part of you, silent, hidden, yet deeply active, that has been directing your life from the shadows. And unless you bring it into awareness, you're freed. Will remain a concept, not a reality. This isn't about psychology as a profession. It's about self-confrontation. Jung offered not comfort, but confrontation. He asked us to descend, not to escape, but to see. The chains that hold us are forged from within. And the moment you realize this, everything changes. You will begin to see beyond your behavior. You will notice the patterns, not just in your life, but in every story, every relationship, every decision. And with that awareness, you face a choice. Continue in the dark or dare to face the light that might blind you before it sets you free. 1. The quiet architect of your suffering. Most of the pain in your life hasn't come from malice. It hasn't come from grand betrayals or cosmic injustice. It has come from repetition, from making the same mistake with different names and different faces. And somewhere along the way, you began to wonder if the universe was conspiring against you. But the universe wasn't repeating. You were. Carl Jung understood this. He saw that beneath our daily frustrations and disappointments lies a pattern, repetitive, unconscious, and persistent. It whispers in familiar disappointments, lurks in déjà vu decisions, and reappears in emotional loops we swear we'll never fall into again. The tragedy is not that life is painful. The tragedy is that we don't know why we keep walking into the same fire. You weren't born knowing how to sabotage yourself. That knowledge was passed down through your environment, your parents, your unspoken fears. Jung believed that the unconscious mind doesn't simply contain forgotten memories, it stores forgotten identities. And these hidden parts of us are not silent. They speak every time we choose from fear instead of trust, every time we settle because we can't imagine we deserve more. The architecture of your suffering isn't random. It's been built brick by brick, belief by belief. The way you react to conflict, the kind of love you chase, the fear of failure that feels like instinct. All of these are echoes of something deep, or an inner blueprint you didn't consciously draw but still follow. Most people never stop to examine this. They just assume life is hard, that relationships are supposed to hurt, that success is meant to feel hollow. But Jung proposed a radical alternative. Perhaps suffering is not the enemy. Perhaps suffering is the map. When you feel rejected and fall apart, that moment is not meaningless. It is revealing something you've yet to reconcile. When you chase achievement and feel emptier, with each milestone that is not failure, it is feedback. And when you react with disproportionate emotion that is not irrationality, it is a flare from a part of you begging to be understood. Jung warned us, the unconscious will govern our lives until we have the courage to make it conscious. If you don't meet the architect of your suffering, you will keep living in the house it built. The walls will feel familiar, but they will always be too small. Freedom begins when you stop asking, "Why does this always happen to me?" and start asking, "What inside me keeps choosing this?" Healing doesn't begin with blame, it begins with curiosity. Not to judge yourself, but to gently investigate the blueprint that governs you. The quiet architect is not cruel, it is forgotten. And forgotten parts of you don't go silent, they go underground. To understand your patterns is not weakness, it is the highest form of strength. Because when you see the structure, you can change it. When you name the loop, you can break it. And when you finally speak with the parts of you that have only ever cried out through chaos, you become whole. 2. The monster in the mirror. There's a reason you recoil when you see a flaw in someone else. Often it's not because you despise them, but because unconsciously you recognize that same flaw in yourself. Jung called this rejected part of the self the shadow, a concept that is easy to romanticize but brutal to confront. The shadow isn't just your bad temper or your guilt. It's the part of you you've been taught to deny so thoroughly that you forget it ever existed. It contains the impulses you suppress, the urges you label as unacceptable, and the memories you've chosen to bury. But none of it vanishes. What you exile from consciousness festers in the dark and finds ways to come back, usually when you least expect it. You might lash out and not understand why. You might keep chasing people who hurt you, not realizing it's your shadow choosing them for you. You might pretend you're happy when inside you're quietly collapsing. The more you perform the role of the good person, the more distorted your shadow becomes, because every act of denial feeds it. But the shadow isn't your enemy. In fact, it holds your vitality. Hidden in its chaos is the creative energy you've forgotten. That raw, untamed power, if acknowledged, can become fuel for transformation, but only if you have the courage to look at it, and most people don't. We live in a world that punishes transparency. You're expected to be polished, pleasant, and predictable, so you tear yourself. You wear masks, you play roles. Over time, the mask fuses to your skin, and even you forget who's behind it. To see the shadow, you must stop moralizing your emotions. Anger is not evil, jealousy is not failure, fear is not weakness. These are signals, signposts pointing to wounds unhealed. If you follow them with honesty, you'll find their origin. And once you face what's inside, it loses its power to control you. Jung warned us. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Fate, in this sense, is not divine punishment. It's psychological inertia. And the first act of rebellion against that inertia is self-recognition. To confront your shadow is not to destroy it, but to disarm it. Integration is the key. The same energy that once sabotaged you can become your compass. The same rage that burned your relationships can fuel your art. The same envy that hollowed your joy can reveal what you truly loan. G4. You don't overcome your darkness by eliminating it. You overcome it by including it in your light. 3. A mind that isn't yours alone. You were not born into a blank slate. Long before you spoke your first words, you had already inherited a vocabulary of symbols. Deep, ancient forms that speak not to logic, but to something older and quieter inside you. These are archetypes, and they are not just psychological theories. They are the original templates of human behavior, embedded in the collective unconscious that Jung so urgently tried to reveal. Think of your personal mind as a house you live in. You know the furniture, the corners, the paint. But beneath that house lies an entire subterranean city, dark, intricate, and ancient. The collective unconscious is that city. It's not personal, but it's profoundly influential. It shapes your fears, your attractions, your dreams, even your suffering. Every culture in human history has told the same stories in different tongues. The wise old man, the wounded child, the mother, the hero, the betrayer. These characters appear in mythology, religion, cinema, and fairy tales. But they're not fiction. They're inside you, and they're not passive observers. They are active participants in your life script. You may think you're falling in love by choice. You may believe you're choosing a career freely. But often it's an archetype playing out a story through you. This isn't mystical, it's structural. And if you don't know which archetype is guiding you, you'll confuse its voice for your own. Some people live as perpetual martyrs, drawn to suffering because a savior archetype dominates their psyche. Others sabotage intimacy because the orphan archetype convinces them they will always be abandoned. These patterns feel personal, but they are not private. They are echoes from a well deeper than you know. The danger lies not in having archetypes, but in being possessed by them unconsciously. When you're unaware, they write your life as if you were a puppet. When you become conscious, you can collaborate with them. You can direct the energy instead of being swept away by it. Jung didn't advocate erasing these archetypes. He taught us to name them, to speak with them, to negotiate. Because once you know which forces are at work within you, you stop being a victim of your narrative. You start becoming its author. This awareness doesn't come through intellectual analysis alone. It comes through watching your dreams, listening to your gut reactions, observing the stories you're drawn to again and again. It comes through living with more presence and less autopilot. Freedom, then, is not the absence of influence. It is the presence of inner clarity, and clarity only comes when you admit there are many voices within you. The goal is not to silence them. The goal is to know who's speaking and why. 4. The silent language of the soul. You dream even when you don't remember. Each night, as your conscious mind fades into sleep, another part of you begins to speak, a part you rarely listen to. Carl Jung saw dreams not as random static, but as messages from the deepest layers of the psyche. The unconscious, when it cannot speak through words, speaks through symbols. We have been conditioned to dismiss dreams as nonsense, byproducts of stress or digestion. But the unconscious does not waste energy. It is precise, and when it sends you a dream, especially a recurring one, it is not for entertainment. It is intervention. A man who dreams of drowning might be overwhelmed by emotional burdens he refuses to face. A woman who dreams of an endless corridor might be trapped in a life with no true direction. These symbols are not arbitrary. They are attempts at conversation. The psyche wants integration, and when integration fails by day, it seeks it by night. Jung believed that dreams are compensatory. They bring to light the parts of ourselves we've neglected in waking life. If you are outwardly confident, your dreams may bring forth your vulnerability. If you suppress grief, the dream may present it as a flood or a funeral. The unconscious is not trying to punish you. It is trying to balance you. Learning to interpret dreams isn't about decoding them with a universal guidebook. It is about learning your own symbolic language, one image at a time. A house may mean safety for one person, confinement for another. A snake may signal betrayal in one psyche and transformation in another. Symbols are alive, and they adapt to your individual story. To understand your dreams is not to reduce them to logic. It is to surrender your rational mind and begin listening with the part of you that remembers how to feel before it knew how to speak. And this is precisely why most people avoid their dreams. They ask us to feel what we've buried. Jung's greatest insight was that dreams are a portal to the soul. They bypass the ego's defenses and show us what we truly need. Often they do this with discomfort. You dream of loss because something must be let go. You dream of death because something in you must change. You dream of a child because some innocent part of you longs to return. The modern world rarely encourages us to reflect, let alone dream. It fills every silence with noise, but the silence of night cannot be avoided. And yet it is in that silence that your unconscious waits, not passively but patiently. It will whisper first, then it will speak, then it will shout, not out of cruelty but necessity. To listen to your dreams is to begin the descent inward. It is the first soft knock at the door of your real self. Not the self you've curated, but the self that's always been waiting to be known. 5. Becoming what you've always been. The path to yourself is not paved with perfection. It is paved with contradiction, collapse, and uncomfortable truths. Jung called this process individuation. Not self-improvement, not self-enhancement, but the slow, courageous journey of becoming whole. To individuate is not to become ideal. It is to become real. It is to accept the fragments you once rejected, the identities you feared, the emotions you were told not to feel. It is to stop as king who you should be and start listening to who you already are underneath the roles you've learned to play. This journey is not linear. It comes in waves. Sometimes you feel clear. Other times you feel lost. But each return to confusion is not failure. It is a deepening. You peel away one illusion only to find another. And each peeling is a form of liberation. Most people avoid this process because it threatens everything they've built their identities on. Careers, relationships, and beliefs, these may be challenged. But the cost of avoiding individuation is higher. A life lived in exile from your essence. To become whole is not to eradicate pain. It is to find meaning within it. When you embrace grief, you no longer fear its return. When you integrate your aggression, it no longer turns into self-sabotage. When you accept your neediness, it no longer drives manipulation. This is the paradox. The more you accept your flaws, the less control they have over you. The more you admit your ignorance, the more wisdom becomes available. The more you surrender your image, the more authentic power arises. Jung taught that the self, the archetype of totality, emerges when all parts are welcomed to the table. You stop trying to exile the darkness and instead learn to host it. You don't let it rule, but you don't deny its voice either. To individuate is to stop striving for external validation and begin cultivating inner truth. It's not loud, it's not a ways visible, but it is honest, and in a world obsessed with performance, honesty is revolutionary. This process is not something you complete, it's something you live. It continues as long as you are breathing. Because the self is not a fixed destination, it is a dynamic relationship with every evolving part of you. And here's the quiet miracle. When you stop chasing who you think you're supposed to be, you finally catch up with who you already are. 6. The age of fragmented souls, something unsettling is happening. In a world overflowing with content, we are starving for meaning. Every minute we consume images, updates, and opinions, yet beneath the endless stimulation lies a vast hollowness. Anxiety is no longer an exception, it's the norm. Depression creeps in, not just at night, but in moments of supposed joy. We call it burnout, but what we're really suffering from is spiritual disconnection. Jung warned of this long before smartphones, long before likes and retweets. He foresaw a time when humans would lose touch with their inner worlds, when persona would replace essence. The persona, as Jung defined it, is the mask we wear to function in society. It is not inherently false, but when mistaken for the self, it becomes a prison. We adapt, we perform, we polish the mask. But something inside begins to fracture. The more effort we spend managing appearances, the less energy remains for authentic self. Reflection. Our emotions become blurred, our relationships feel scripted. And the strange thing is, we often can't pinpoint what's wrong. We just know something is missing. Jung saw that modern life would leave us fragmented, not because we are broken, but because we are divided from our own center. The soul cannot be outsourced. It cannot be compressed into affirmations or rescued by success. When ignored, it doesn't die. It withholds. It withdraws its vitality until you are left moving through life like a character in someone else's dream. Look closely. We call it ambition, but sometimes it's avoidance. We call it networking, but often it's loneliness in disguise. Even pleasure can become a sedative, a way to distract from the ache of not knowing who we are. This isn't weakness, it is disorientation. The modern world promises autonomy but delivers confusion. The cost of our constant outward focus is an inward collapse. And this is why Jung's ideas remain radical. He offers no quick solutions, no formula for happiness. What he offers is the courage to look inside when the world demands you look everywhere else. This chapter of the human condition is not about what we lack externally. It is about what we've abandoned internally. We've left behind rituals of meaning, symbols that guide, silence that heals. In their place, we've installed speed, optimization, and noise. And yet, the soul continues to whisper, your symptoms are not random. Your restlessness is not meaningless. They are messengers. They are inner sirens alerting you to a life unlived. Jung did not pathologize this discomfort. He dignified it. He called it a summons, a call back to the inner landscape that modernity paved over. To answer this call, you must reclaim something ancient, solitude, not isolation but intentional stillness, time with no agenda, space with no script. Only then can you begin to hear the voice beneath the static. Only then can the fragments start to remember their place in the whole. 7. The first honest step transformation doesn't begin with knowledge. It begins with truth. Not universal truth, but personal truth. The kind that stings, humbles, and frees all at once. It's the moment you finally admit, I've been avoiding myself. You don't need to map your entire psyche overnight. You don't need to interpret every dream or untangle every archetype. What you need is sincerity. The willingness to look in the mirror without rehearsing excuses. The capacity to sit with a discomfort without numbing it. This is the first step, not enlightenment, not bliss, honesty. For most people, it's the hardest step. Because our entire lives are built to keep us away from it. We are taught to perform, to please, to pretend. And after years of rehearsing who we think we should be, the original self feels distant, even unfamiliar. But it's still there, waiting, watching, intact. When you finally say, enough, something shifts. Not outside, but within. You begin to hear the voice that's been buried under years of noise. You start to notice the patterns you thought were fate. You recognize the masks you've worn so long they almost felt like skin. This moment doesn't look like revelation. It looks like stillness, like silence, like the quiet after a long storm. And it's in this silence that your life begins to rearrange, not because the world changes, but because your perception does. Jung believed that the unconscious is not just a storage, space of past pain, but a source of future possibility. The more you make it conscious, the more you gain access to the parts of yourself that were frozen in time. The child who was silenced, the artist who was dismissed, the lover who was betrayed. They are all still inside you, waiting for their moment to be heard. The work is slow. There will be setbacks. There will be resistance. But if you stay committed to your own honesty, something extraordinary happens. You stop chasing completion, and start cultivating coherence. You stop editing your soul and start expressing it. You do not become someone new. You become someone real. And in that reality, in that undiluted presence, freedom begins. Not as a destination, but as a way of being. The kind of freedom that no one can give you and no one can take away. The kind that was always yours, buried beneath the roles you thought you had to play. This is the beginning, and that beginning is enough. Nothing outside of you will set you free. Not success, not knowledge, not even love. The only liberation that lasts is the kind born from recognition, the recognition of all the parts you've abandoned inside yourself. Carl Jung understood that healing is not the removal of wounds, but their integration. It's not about becoming someone new, it's about recovering the parts of you that were lost in the performance of becoming acceptable. Most people spend their entire lives avoiding this eye. No return. They chase noise to drown out silence. They seek approval to cover self-contempt, but the soul is patient, and when it calls, it won't be with clarity, but with discomfort, with restlessness, with that persistent feeling that something essential is missing. If you felt that, it means you're already on the path. And that path doesn't lead outward. It spirals inward, toward the only thing that has ever belonged to you, your truth.